Hey, good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I know a few of you were out honky-tonking last night. I was out there making sure that everybody was okay, so glad to see you. Welcome again. This is the final day of our conference. Hope everybody's having a good time and learning something and getting to make some new friends here. That's really what it's all about for most of us. Just a couple of quick things before we get going. You all have your pamphlets there with the workbooks, and there's evaluations in there on all the presentations and so forth. We're just hoping that you could fill it out, maybe do a couple of comments, and it really helps us as we plan future events for everybody. So if you could take a few minutes and pass those into Amanda or on the back counter at the end of it, that'd be great. And a reminder, we're doing a pricing workshop. It's an optional pricing workshop. There's no additional fee. It starts at 1:30 in the same room, and it's more of a workshop. We're hoping you guys we can all compare notes on how we price cabinets, because it seems to be one of the biggest subjects we're always talking about. How the heck do we price cabinets, right? So I think everybody will have a method, and no way's right or wrong, but we'll just compare notes, and I think it'll be a good workshop for all of us. So Matt Wayner and I will be sitting up here. You can throw stuff at them. I want to make a quick announcement. This is something that the board, we've talked about a little bit, and we want to recognize a real good friend of the CMA here, a longtime member who just continues to give back, kind of a quiet but very involved gentleman who claims to be retired, but I see him at every event, and he always has a lot to offer. We've decided to create an ambassador category in our membership. This gentleman will be the first and only for right now. It's more of a board discretion type of thing. I'd like to recognize Jim Falk. Could you stand up, Jim? So, Jim, you're the official ambassador, holding this title solely right now with all the benefits and honors that go with it. And see Amanda about that stuff. So, but thanks, Jim. Really appreciate everything you do. And now I'd like to introduce Peggy with DC Distributing to get things rolling. Thanks.
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you to CMA for hosting, and of course, open bar last night. A little bit about DC Distributing. It started in 1986. I started working for the company in 92 when I was 10. My husband and I bought the company in 07, and almost 16 years later, here we are. We raised 3 teenagers during that time. We're always being questioned. How do you do it? How do you work together every day? How do you live together every day? We're constantly being asked that. And my big thing is you're not just in love with this person, you really have to like this person. And the other thing is that you've got to know your strengths and weaknesses. Without knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, believe me, your partner or significant other will tell you what they are, especially your weaknesses. Lost my train of thought here, sorry about that. Anyway, Kelly mentioned yesterday about working together and being partners in life and at work. It's so difficult. You eat, sleep, drink, drive kids to sports, raise your kids, and everything is done around work. They say you need meetings, you need company meetings, you need this, you need that. It's a meeting 24/7 when you're together 24/7. DC Distributing is an edge banding company. We sell edge banding. Please, if anybody's in need of edge banding, let us know. Not just PVC edge banding, but real wood, all species. We also can pre-glue material and slit it. So let us know if you need anything. On that note, I'll introduce Paul Downs. our first speaker. Paul Downs Custom Conference Tables. You may recognize him because he's spoken at many industry events. For those who don't know his story, allow me to share it. Paul launched his company in 1986 and was running a successful furniture business when a twist of fate changed the direction of his career. He was asked by a client to build a boardroom table, and after doing so, he added the photo of the completed project to the website under miscellaneous projects. Soon after, Google chose the picture to be the top search result for his boardroom tables. And Paul's phone started ringing immediately. Was that you, Paul? Long story short, now the company focuses exclusively on making expensive conference tables. There he is, Paul. His phone doesn't stop ringing. Like you, Paul struggles with hiring and retaining employees. He's going to share with us today about how he successfully invests in his people. Join me in welcoming quietly, because there may be some hangovers, Paul to the stage.
Thank you. You can all hear me? You can all see me? Okay, the hangovers aren't that bad. Let me just say one thing before I start. 2 weeks ago, I came down with COVID and had it pretty badly, and was coughing and blah, blah, blah for weeks, and I still feel like my voice is a little bit dicey. So, I'm going to be taking sips of this, the mystery fluid, that is actually 6 cough drops dissolved in water. And that will refresh my voice. So if I'm doing that, it's not some kind of booze. I'm just trying to get through this thing. All right. Thank you to the CMA for asking me to do this. It's always both fun and frightening to get up in front of a group of my peers and try to explain something I've done and not make an idiot of myself while I'm doing it. I have not given this talk before, and I actually don't know exactly how long it lasts. So we're going to try to get through it in an hour. And if it goes a little bit longer, the ladies who are following me have generously offered to not give their talk and to go have some drinks instead. So we'll see how that goes. Let's start off with just a basic question. Why are we worrying about culture at all? Why do we need to get into it? And I'll tell you that my nature as a boss and as a person was never to worry about what my employees did once they left the shop. And I was just kind of shy about telling them anything about how to think about their work or what to do other than just the basics. So when you start a company and you hire a bunch of people, you're putting them together in a group and you're actually giving them quite a lot of resources that are your decision to hand to them. You're telling them where to work, you're telling them when to show up, you're telling them what to do, you're telling them how to do it, you're telling them what tools to use. And a lot of us just stop there. That's it. We feel like we've done our job. There's no logical reason why you can't go a couple of steps farther and start telling people not only what to do and sort of the technical aspect of how to do it, but you could tell them things like how to get along, how to have a fight, how to deal with a customer, how to deal with difficult situations in their own work. You can do that. And that's what this talk is really about, my efforts to do that. And I'm going to start with a question. What happens when you don't do that? And I can give you a very informed answer because I did that for 30 years. I gave them the tools, the place, the work, told them how to do it, but just let everything else be whatever it was. So what happens is that when you don't give your employees information about what to think about, how to do it, they make up their own stories. They bring to the workforce their own, let's call them pathologies, their own problems, whatever was baked into them in their upbringing or in the previous workplaces they had, or how their family taught them to think about themselves or get along with others. They bring all that into this workplace you're trying to assemble. And you have no control over any of that. You can't go back and give someone a better childhood or teach them a different way to be angry. I mean, you can try, but it doesn't really work. So the next step is to say, okay, I've given them everything, and I'm still running into these problems. Because when you don't address the culture, what happens is stuff pops up at random. You got people who get along for a year, and then one says to the other sort of the magic word, and that spring-loaded reaction comes out, and someone can get extremely angry. Or people can think that their coworkers or management has some plan for them that's not true at all, and they're making up a story in their head. I've got one employee who's extremely sensitive to what he thinks of as disrespect, and would just completely fly off the handle if he felt that people disrespected him. And he was wired to be suspicious of people's motives. So if you walked into him in the morning and you said, "Hey, good morning, Kevin," he'd be like, "What does he mean by that? What's he really, good morning? That's not a good morning for me." And so he would just work himself into these loops. Has anybody ever had an employee like that? Just oh, there's a few. Anybody married to anybody like that? All right, no answers there. So anyway, when you don't define culture, you're leaving all these things to chance, and you're letting every piece of bad baggage that your employees bring in the door every morning. And you're doing nothing to prevent any of their worst things from popping out. And I can tell you from experience that that makes life more difficult for a boss. It just does. Because being a boss is hard enough already. How many of you on Monday morning put together a checklist of maybe 10 or 12 things, and you start doing them, and by the end of the day, it's completely different. People walk into your office with this, that, the other thing. You're just trying to manage the business and trying to manage your people and have it be a constant struggle and surprise. That's no fun. You know, why do that? So, why culture? Because it presents a solution to this problem. Now, I went, as I mentioned, a very long time before I addressed this. And I first started hearing about culture back in 2012 when I joined a CEO's group called Vistage. And as it happened, our very first speaker was about culture. And I'm going to talk about this guy a little bit subsequently. But I sort of heard that as like, culture. You know, you get that itch, like, that doesn't feel comfortable. I don't want to tell people what to do. They come to me, they're who they are. How am I going to counter all those years of upbringing, whatever they bring in? Like, it's just not my place to do it. That's what I was thinking. But some of my other Vistage peers owned manufacturing companies, various different types of companies, and they started to roll these programs out. And what was interesting is seeing the speaker, like all speakers, gives you some neatly packaged ideas that sound really cool. We got a good one yesterday, the GROW method. And then you go back to your shop and you're like, Jesus. You know, like, excuse me. I just can't do that. There never seems a moment to stop everybody and start telling them about something you learned out in the business group. It just never felt natural to me. So unlike speakers who come and go and then you're just on to the next idea, I was, in my group, able to see the effect over years of people rolling out these programs and hear about what they'd done and hear about how they managed it and hear about what the results were. And now, it takes years for a good idea to penetrate this. It takes years. And I had to watch for many, many years as I see other companies that I know well, know the owners, have been in their shops, and they're making great strides with managing their workforce and turning unhappy workplaces into much more harmonious and productive workplaces. And they're doing it through these ideas of telling people what to think about the work. Now, that's going along sort of in the back of my mind, but what really got me to finally make the leap was hiring a guy, young man, who came out of the Navy, and he was involved in something called the SWIC boats. And I don't know if anybody here knows what the, you know what the SWIC boats are? Can you quickly explain what the SWIC boats are?
They basically swoop in and pick up the seals, yeah,
That's right.
from hostile environments.
The seals, they swim. They're seals. The boats come and get the seals. So they do all the same training. They're completely as badass, I would say even more badass. And so this young man, Damien, great guy, and when he showed up at the shop, he started asking me questions about how, like, what is this organization? How do you teach people how to be a Paul Downs cabinet maker? What are my paths to advancement? Do we have training manuals? He's bringing all these ideas from the United States Navy, which is an organization which has a lot more resources than Paul Downs cabinet makers. So I'm like, well, no, we don't really have any training manuals. No, there's not steps to advancement. I need you to do veneer, and you got to do the veneer. And everything he was talking about, I didn't have. But I realized that he was also an example of something that I've been trying very, very hard to do, which is take someone who's got a good attitude and turn them into a real craftsman. And so that there was a lot of things he was asking for I wasn't going to be able to come up with because we're busy doing work. So we can't do after action analysis every time we make a table. There's just no time for it. But that's how the military works. I mean, they think everything to death. But what was really interesting was listening to him talk about the missions they've been on and just the culture of how the teams work and how they interact. Because those teams are, in a way, like your dream set of employees. They're taught to take initiative. They're taught to think before they do anything. They're taught to have a plan. They're taught to have a backup. They're taught to get along with each other. Now, the exact details of how they get along with each other is very male, very military. There's a fair amount of what you might call hazing, but that's not going to be appropriate in a cabinet shop. But the key thing to me was they're taking pretty ordinary people. And Damien was interesting because he knew he was not a super smart guy. Like, he's probably got an IQ of 100. Just a very average intelligence, got C minuses in high school. But through a program of how to think and how to act, the United States Navy turned him into a very effective leader and someone who, when they came to my shop, when he showed up, he's, where's the manuals, where's this and that? And I was like, well, I don't have any of that. I'm going to write them. And he sat down and worked out a thick notebook of how to deal with veneer splicers, which, if any of you have ever run one, is a nightmare machine. And he just knew how to do it, and he brute forced it. And he overcame any impediment that he brought in terms of being able to understand the permutations of the math of the layout of veneer, which is complicated. And he succeeded. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's amazing. United States Navy takes ordinary people, winnows out the ones who can't stand in cold water for 24 hours, but takes a group of people who have a particular skill set, gets them to work together, and then sends them out to do god-awful things in terrible places. And they come back, and they're still a cohesive unit. They understand their mission. They understand the resources available, and they get it done. And I was like, I want that. So I've had these ideas presented to me. I'm quite familiar with what they look like, and I've seen them rolled out. And now I'm presented with an employee who came out of the service doing all the cool things they do and is now living at home with his wife and his 4 kids under 6 years old. And he and I talking, he was like starting to get, like antsy. I want to go back in the service, because he wasn't actually out. The service doesn't let guys like this go anymore. They're always kind of half in, and they can get called in at any moment. So Damien is still potentially on the hook to go overseas and do stuff. When the Ukraine war rolled around, his whole unit got activated, sent to New Jersey, but they didn't actually go to Ukraine. And then a couple of years before that, I can't remember what Trump was up to, but they had to all run over to Egypt and stand there for a while. So those are the guys who do that. So he's at home with a wife and a kid and diapers and shouting and all that, and he's at work and he's just putting pieces of wood together, and then he goes and deploys and he's gunning down America's enemies with his buds and $1 billion worth of equipment. Like, how do I compete with his desire, with that itch in his head? And so like, I gotta start doing something here. I need to roll this out. So the actual concepts, I'm going to go over in a minute, but I'm going to start first with thinking about what went through my head. Whenever I have a crazy idea and I want to do this, I start looking around for people who are doing it successfully. And if you want to put ideas into someone's head and have them stay there, we actually have a couple of excellent models available of how to do that. Because there are human organizations that have existed for a very, very long time that all follow the same pattern of how they get people in their group to all be pointing in the same direction. You don't have to guess, because I put it up on the slide, but I started thinking about religions. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are in some of the smaller religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, various flavors of Orthodox Jew, and that's just who lives around our area. And so I end up hiring people, I've had a lot of clients, and you see that religions are actually quite impressive because almost always they start from nothing. That there's somebody who's just like, I'm going to start a religion. Now, are they thinking that? I don't know. Did Buddha think that? I don't know. Was Jesus thinking that? I don't know. But they did the same thing. They started from nothing, and they got a small group of people together, and they got them all to think the same way, to understand the mission, and then they built it from there. And what's amazing is how many religions are still going on after thousands of years. And they have a playbook. And I'm going to get to that in a second. The military is not as old an organization. I mean, the idea of a military has been around forever. The United States Navy, I think it was started in 1780 or something. But that's an organization that has a long tradition of bringing people in, teaching them a mission, getting them to feel like they're part of an organization, part of a team, part of a tribe. They're good at that. And they've been doing it successfully for hundreds of years. And then the last thing that I thought about was raising my own children. Now, I hate the idea of presenting my company as a family. Like when people talk about their company, it's like, we're a big family. You're not a family. You can fire your employees. And they can quit. And that's not how my family works. But when you think about it, when you have little kids, they're born, they come out, they're nothing. I mean, they're a baby, but they're a blank slate. And you start giving them information, and you teach them to be a member of your family. And how do you do that? Well, part of that raising children playbook is the same thing that these other organizations do. And these are what I like to call the simple machines of culture. Now, we all know what the simple machines are. The inclined plane, the wedge, I can't remember, maybe that's the same thing. The screw, what else are there? Anybody can name another simple machine? Pulley, there we go. With those things, you can build a whole civilization. There's simple machines. And the simple machines of culture are, one, have some rules. You need rules, because humans actually like rules. We all understand them implicitly. That's part of our human equipment. Second thing, rituals. Rituals are repeated events, actions, whatever, but they happen on a regular basis. Everybody understands what they are. And you go do them, and when you're done, you feel better. The CMA convention. I came into this feeling kind of bad because we're having some trouble with sales. The ritual of talking to people who are my peers and knowing that this happens on a regular basis, it makes it feel good. You feel like you're part of a group. And that ritual reinforces your membership in the group. And then the last thing, and this is where child raising comes in, repetition. So, how did you teach your kids to say please and thank you? I mean, I don't know how you did it. I know how I did it. I said to my kids, say please, say thank you, every day, maybe 190 times a day for 5 years. Now they say please and thank you, not to me, but they say it to other people. So I guess it kind of worked. But that repetition is the critical part. And where a lot of times when you're given ideas about a thing to do, and even some suggestions about how to do it, that's the ritual, people fall down on the repetition. And particularly when you're running a small shop, like you're all going to come back from this convention, you're going to walk into the shop, same old place, same old people, same old tools. And you're going to be like, I heard a great idea from Paul Downs. And you could do it. You could explain it to people. You could give them the rules. You could do all that. You could set up a ritual. If you don't repeat it forever, it won't work. Why do churches bring people back for the same thing on Sunday morning? Every Sunday, forever, right? I'm raised Catholic. I went to Mass every Sunday for 18 years. Then I started to think differently, but I went every Sunday for 18 years. I know that Mass. I know what Catholicism is. And because it was just repeat, 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 repeat. And that feels weird as a boss, but that's the actual way you make these things work. So let's talk about the concept I used to come up with the rules. And the first one was, this is in direct response to my employee Damien's sort of like, I feel lost. I'm not in the Navy every day anymore. I'm just at home. I'm coming to work. And he was talking about, some desire to redeploy, or he was looking forward to it. Now, he's somewhat injured from all his years, so it's not always like, I just want to get out of here and go play with the guys. He's got a real bad back from they dropped the boats from an airplane at 40,000 feet, pushed the boat out the back of the airplane, and then they pushed the guys out right after it. So they free fall till about 1,000 feet. And then the parachutes get open, the boat hits the water, the guys hit the water, they got to swim and get on the boat. And then the boats have to go on an ocean, which has waves. The boats go fast. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those YouTube videos of like people wiping out in a boat. Like that's what those guys are doing all the time. So there's a ton of pounding. And his back's all screwed up. And he's home. He's like, my back hurts. I'm 30 years old. My wife wants me to stay home. I want to deploy. And I just said, you've got a mission now. Take care of your wife. Do you like your wife? You have 4 kids. I presume you want kids. You understand where they come from. And there's more coming. So you have to just make this your mission. And working, contributing to the health of the company, the health of the group, and the prosperity of your family, that's as vital a mission as going out and shooting bad guys. You did that. Your country thanks you. Me as a citizen, I thank you. And now I want you to be part of my team, and I want you to be part of your family. And he responded well to that. He understood what I was talking about. And so that was a powerful, seeing him be convinced by that argument made me think, I should probably talk to the rest of the people about this too. Concept 2. Now this is the source of much of what I actually rolled out. A guy named David Friedman, and this is the gentleman I referred to who I heard in 2012. Guy who was running an accounting firm in New Jersey, and he had sort of heard the whole, let's have a mission statement concept, that was very, very au courant in the 90s. Everybody's like, we need a mission statement, we need a mission statement. And you're an accounting firm in New Jersey, you know, like, what's your mission? Save rich guys' taxes or whatever. It's not inspiring. And he realized that he could come up with a slightly different way of doing this, which is beyond a mission statement, which usually is a certain amount of nonsense. I'm really trying not to swear here, I'm sorry, but instead of just 10 bullet points that are vague, empty nonsense that nobody really wants to get their head around, his insight was that, no, you need to provide some detail. You need to, aside from just the headline, give people something a little more trenchant that they can apply to situations they run in every day. So a 5 bullet point mission statement is not enough to give people guidance to how to do their work and what to think about it. And I'm going to show you just a couple of examples of what he came up with. So there's a headline concept: do what's right for the customer, do the right thing always, make quality personal. Now, if there was none of that small print below each one of these things, and someone just handed them to you and said, hey, you know what, I want you to do what's best for the customer, and always, you know, do the right thing, and make your quality personal, and deliver legendary customer service. Got it? I'm going to repeat myself. Got it? And people will be like, yes, sir, boss. But do they know what those things mean? No, you have to provide detail. Now, there's actually 36 statements he came up with that were his idea of what was appropriate for his company doing his work in his situation. He knew his workforce, and he wrote them. I don't think that they're a great fit for my company. They weren't something that I would have written. But I took that concept and then saw another guy in my group who is a manufacturer running a company that does precision grinding, has a blue-collar workforce, deals with a range of customers, runs into some very difficult situations because what he does technically is quite demanding. And he wrote his own set that I have a passing resemblance to these, and rolled them out in his company. And over the course of years, I saw, oh, that really worked for him. So I took John Shegda's rules as mine and came up with 7 basic ideas of how I want people to be a Paul Downs cabinet maker. CMA put the detailed part of all these in your book, and I don't know whether you guys have figured that out yet, but I didn't want to get up here and just read them to you. That doesn't really make any sense. But the basic heading was craftsmanship. Now, this is something that I've had in my mind for years, and I don't even know why. But obviously, starting off as a young furniture maker, you need some ideas about what is good craftsmanship. And this was back in the 80s, there's no internet, there's no nothing. What there are, Fine Woodworking Magazine and all those James Krenoff books. And I don't know whether you guys are familiar with those. But they're presenting a vision of what craftsmanship is. And it's a very particular vision about a single maker putting their hands on work, preferably using old techniques, and making a thing that's beautifully built from one end to the other. That you don't flip it over and see something ugly. Everything is considered. And anybody who's tried to make a living putting those principles to work quickly realizes you can't operate a business that way. You've got to invest in technology, machines, training. You've got to find fast ways to do things. It's not a hobby. The work can't be lingered over and just wallowed in like a hobbyist could. You got to get it out the door. So, craftsmanship. What I saw as we had to kind of dumb down some of our processes was that there's another opportunity for craftsmanship. That the craftsmanship can be everything the company does, not just the product. Craftsmanship is how you answer the phone, how you write an email, how fast you write the email, Do you write bullshit emails? Sorry. Or do you write emails that are helpful, contain useful, actionable information? Do you spell check them? When you communicate with a client, with a coworker, with your boss, are you succinct, to the point, giving useful information? Or do you ramble on and waste everybody's time? Like, I had a couple of employees like that. So craftsmanship, doing things well, deciding what you want, what quality you want, that's within the control of the boss. You can make a decision about your own company, your own product, and everything you do about how well you do it. And I always want that to be throughout my organization. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that most of our clients never heard of us until 5 minutes before they picked up the phone. So we're getting calls from people driven by these Google searches, and it could be anybody on the other side of the phone. You don't know whether it's someone that's going to waste your time, or a senior member of the judiciary who wants a personal table, or we did a table for Donald Trump. I've talked to NFL quarterbacks. I've talked to everybody. So when I answer that phone, I know exactly how I'm going to answer it so that we establish credibility right from the get-go. Because without credibility, I can't sell a $100,000 dining conference table to some guy in Seattle. Need credibility, and I need my people to execute it. So I've been banging that whole idea of, like, you guys, there's a right way to do stuff and we're going to do it. Had been on all my people about that for years, but I'd never written it down. So craftsmanship always everywhere. That's actually one of my most important things. Do what's best for the client. If you read what I wrote in the detail of that, you'll notice it's not the client is always right. And the way it works out is the client doesn't always hear the unvarnished truth either. When something bad happens on the shop floor and you fix it, do you give the client a breakdown of that? I don't. If we fixed it, we fixed it. And they don't need to hear that. They don't want to hear that. What good is it going to do them to see, like, oh boy, we barely managed to make your table? You know, like, they're not going to. Woo, that was close. Nobody wants to hear that. So doing what's best for the client is not always just exactly what the client wants. It's what you think is best for the client. Nobody wins unless we all win. Now, my shop is very large. It's about the size of the 2 Cumberland millwork buildings put together. And we have people working there, and they're scattered all around the room. And what I found was, unless guided otherwise, people will try to solve problems that they encounter for themselves and just, like, come up with something and start doing it. Don't tell anybody about it. They just start doing it. And that can cause serious problems for other members of the team, because we're a company which has distinct job roles. Like, there's sales guys, there's project managers, there's engineers, there's the shop floor, there's finishing, and then there's packing and shipping. If you solve a problem over here in a way that makes this guy's life much worse, you haven't solved the problem. So nobody wins unless we all win means that ideas need to be brought in front of everybody and considered in a way so that everybody advances from that. And on a personal level, that's the idea of things that people do to make themselves feel better frequently have a negative effect on people around them. So how many have had a smart-ass, sarcastic employee? Anybody ever had one of those? They think they're a riot, but they may be really, really giving problems to the people around them. And so that person left unchecked maybe think that they're winning the game by being the funniest one, or they pick on someone and everybody else laughs because that's how humans are, horrible. But that can't be allowed to go on. And so the nobody wins concept is multifaceted, and there's a lot of different ways it rolls out. Operate at the highest level. It shouldn't need to be said to any employee that we're actually trying to do what we do as well as we can possibly do it. Shouldn't be said. You shouldn't need to say it. But just like rules, rituals, you've got to make things explicit, and you're going to be repeating that one. Innovate. Now, people get us over Google, they call us up, and if they heard a scratchy answering machine that said, "I'm not available, I will call you at some undetermined point," they go away. We are always being compared ourselves to the other experiences people are having online. Paul Downs Cabinet Makers is an online experience for most of our clients. So if we don't look great and look as good as we possibly can compared to Amazon, Apple, you name it. Like, you may think you're winning the battle if you're the best cabinet shop compared to the other cabinet shops. But if you don't look like some version of what the cutting edge of the society is, you're going to have a hard time establishing credibility with certain clients. And again, we're dealing with strangers all the time, and some of those strangers have the choice of anybody in the world to do their work. We have to present as buttoned down, together, responsive, and actually putting that in a package that you can't get online, which is a human being is helping you. And so our big focus of innovation is to make sure that we're delivering as quickly as an online experience, but make sure that we're doing it as thoroughly as a human being can do. Because if you've ever tried to get help from one of these, a Facebook or something, you know it falls apart right there. There's no one to call, there's no one to talk to, no one to answer your question, you're on your own, go away. So we're combining that notion of instant gratification with human interaction. And the promise I make to my clients is that you're going to get help from a smart person immediately. And that's our form of innovation. Whoops. Go back. Sorry, teamwork. There's a couple of statements about how to go along as a team, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time with that. Resolving conflict. This one has actually been the most useful because it's an acknowledgement that conflict is going to arise in the workplace. Like one of the culture statements could easily be, don't fight. Don't fight with your coworkers. Because no boss wants to see it. Like when you see two of your employees having at each other, that is one of the worst moments as a boss. Because now you got to do something. And it's already messed up. And I can guarantee you, none of us have ever put watch Jim and Bob have a fight on our to-do list today. Nobody wants that. We're not in that business. This isn't the MMA. So when I have employees, and I will make one other observation. I've got 26 employees. 98% of the beefs come from 2 of them. And I imagine that some of you have experienced this as well. Most people are fairly easy to get to do something. And most people want to get along. And the trouble comes from a small group of them. Now, both of these employees, in my case, when they're not off the rails, are very capable. And one of them in particular does a job that I would never want to do, which is handling deliveries and installations. And that means, in our case, a lot of extremely early mornings in trucks going to Manhattan or DC, and then having to deal with a long day of installing in a difficult situation. So I've come to, whenever I see my employees hassling with each other, bring them in my office, sit them down. I have all these statements on the wall of my office, and I make each of them read this entire paragraph out loud. You do it, read it out loud to me and the rest of us, and they go through it. And they're sheepish because they're in there because they're in trouble. Then the other one, read it. They read it. All right, now let's have the discussion. What happened here? You just both agreed to the ground rules of how to have this fight. And then I can go in and solve the problem, hopefully. So having these statements, having some detail, this is an example. Like, don't fight is a nice statement. When you fight, do it this way is a way more effective statement because it gives us some boundaries, some rules, and we know where the guardrails are, and we know what the consequences are going to be if we mess it up. So that's just one I wanted to bring forward because I've found it to be so useful. Now, the last concept was also from one of my Vistage group speakers. And this guy was a speaker. It's actually kind of an interesting speaker. He came in and he's like, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe this. He's like, I'm going to give you 45 business ideas in 30 seconds. You know, and just like started firing them off. Boom, boom, boom. Send your customer that you're not doing business with a baseball and say, I want to play ball with you. You know, and just crazy things. That one sticks in my mind because I would never do that. But one he had that was pretty good, the one-sentence challenge. You're in an elevator with someone, they say, what do you do? And you could say, I'm a cabinet maker. You could say, I'm an accountant. What's your company? You know, so what is really what this comes down to. Can you describe your company, what you're about, in one sentence or less, in a way that makes sense to people? And it's not just a statement of the business you're in. Why are you in business? And thinking about this, and thinking about what I told Damien about his mission being to take care of his family, I realized that we're really talking about two main concepts in my business. The two things I want to have happen. Craftsmanship, because I didn't get into furniture making because I like to do sloppy stuff. I do like things buttoned down. I like things well made. I like the process to be elegant. Craftsmanship, I want it everywhere in my company. We're about craftsmanship. Prosperity, what does that mean? Why prosperity? Well, I think we all are aware that it is a challenge to make a living in woodworking. This is not a business where gold is showered on everybody at all moments. I have a son who went to MIT, got a degree in computer science, and has spent the last 12 years working in the tech industry. Completely different ballgame. Money just falling out of the sky, everywhere. You could be a complete idiot and walk away with millions of dollars. And if you have any actual skills, the money is just coming at you like waves. He made $1 million last year. And I was like, I haven't made $1 million ever. There's no way. It's just amazing. And we're just in a different world. How are we going to afford to pay our workers enough to buy a house, to buy a car, to have some kids? How are we going to get together enough money to buy health insurance? How are we going to do that? Well, part of it is we got to have a goal. And the goal in my mind is to arrange our business and our finances and get as much money as we can from our clients and then distribute it to everybody who works in the company as best as possible so that they can afford to have a decent middle-class American life. You can buy a car, you can buy a house, maybe. It's not easy to buy houses. You could send your kids to school one of these days. You can take a vacation. You can buy a couple of extra pairs of sneakers if you want. I don't want my employees living on the edge. I just don't want to. I don't believe that's right for anybody. And I have a lot of employees who came from extremely humble backgrounds. And the way the modern American economy is arranged, people who come from extremely humble backgrounds don't have a great shot at enjoying an actual prosperous life. The system is stacked against people who don't have an education, who came from another country, who may not be 130 IQ, never went to a fancy college, started work in a loading dock somewhere and got abused for years by giant corporations that don't give a damn about their people. Does any of this sound familiar? I don't want my company to be that. I want it to be something else. And the only way that I can sensibly have a conversation with some rich dude who wants to drop 80 grand on a fancy table for his own little office is to think about, okay, that guy can afford to do that. I don't know why, but he can. And thank God I'm in a position to take his money and turn it into our money and deliver prosperity to everybody in my company. And so that's why craftsmanship for the clients, craftsmanship for ourselves so that we know we're doing things well, prosperity. We take the resources that others have amassed, some ways I would agree with, some of my clients don't like them much. I did a table for Alex Jones, who I think is the most reprehensible person on earth. I didn't know who he was at the time. This was 2006. That guy's a complete piece of crap. But we took his money and made it our money and did things that I want to do that help my team. So that's craftsmanship and prosperity. And we further, just like the Friedman statements about how to have your culture, I wanted to define what craftsmanship was. And I came down to 3 basic ways of thinking about it. Craftsmanship in the product is fairly obvious. You know, there shouldn't be any open joints or warping or anything. You know, like, okay, you're making a nice product. I'm sure you're all making a nice product because you wouldn't be here if you didn't care about this. And then craftsmanship in the process. And this is, again, getting back to that idea that everything can be done well or poorly. And so that we should define what we're talking about when in the process. It's how you relate to your coworkers. It's how you relate to the client. And then the last thing is craftsmanship in the person. What are our personal approaches to work and how we could do it and how we could aspire to be the best kind of craftsman, the best worker, the best person. Because there's satisfaction in knowing you're good at something. I mean, I play soccer and I'm really bad at it. And I see other guys who are way better, and a lot of them, we play together every Sunday morning. Bunch of old guys kicking each other. The ones who are the best players, there's no correlation between what they do all day, but some of the best players, when they get on that field, they rule it, and everybody else respects them because of their skills. And they may have a job, they may be a parole officer, they may be a high school teacher, something where they get a lot of shit all day. Sorry, did it again. When they get out on the field, they're leaders because they're doing the thing well and they get satisfaction from it. And I want my people to understand that. That's an achievable attainment. Now, prosperity is a little bit harder to define, but we basically broke it down to a prosperous company has choices. Now, when I started my business back in the day, it was really, really hard. This is the 80s. It's hard to even find a client. So if I found someone who would even talk to me, whatever they wanted, I had to do it. I had no choice because I was never going to find another client. So I ended up doing a lot of things I didn't want to do or I wasn't good at just because there happened to be someone in front of me. So a prosperous company gets beyond that, and it gets to the point where it can make some decisions about who it does business with, who it doesn't do business with, how it does business, and when to say no. I hope we've all reached a point in our business career where we can say no to a client. Does anybody at a point where they feel like they can't say no to a client? Or we pass? Tell me about one job you just took that you wish you hadn't.
Well, it seemed like it was going to be a pretty simple job. You know, the clients were really great at front, and then as things went on, they demanded more and wanted to make tons of changes, but they also wanted it done already in the past, you know.
And they weren't willing to pay anymore, right?
They had a lot of work and a lot of add-ons.
All right, the client who will never stop adding more items to the list. Nightmare. You want to be able to tell that person, you know, I'm sorry, we're not a good fit for each other. Here's your money back. Go away. That would be a lovely thing to do with many clients. And a company which is prosperous, a company which is run profitably, a company which is amassing resources as opposed to expending resources, has that luxury. Decide who they're going to work with. decide who you're going to hire. A prosperous company has some choices about employees. You don't have to take everybody with a pulse because you've built a culture and you've become a place to work. It's immediately obvious on walking in that this is a decent place to work. You see the people, you see the equipment. Like we were in a bunch of shops yesterday, and the interesting thing to me was that, well, California Closets, there were actually people there doing work. They didn't look all that happy to me, but you know, what do I know? Maybe they love punching buttons in that thing. And then the other two shops, there just wasn't anybody around, so we couldn't really see what's going on. Like I've been in a lot of shops. Anytime I can go to a factory, I go. And you can tell at a glance whether the employees are zombies in a horror film or whether they're engaged. Are they getting along with each other? Are they smiling at each other? How fast do they walk? How messy is it? Does it look like, you know, stuff doesn't get attended to, or does it look like there's something going on here? You can tell that immediately. And so a prosperous company, again, creates a situation where that can go on. Now, benefits are, we should probably just retire the word benefits, because they're not even benefits anymore in the terms of something extra to employment. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to attract any kind of employee in the future without assuming that you have to offer some health insurance, some vacation. The one that we offer that's actually the most valued, as far as I can tell, and is not an easy thing to implement, is flex time, allowing people to come in and work and build their work schedule around their life schedule. You told the story on the podcast, right? How many of you listened to the podcast between me and Lois? So not everybody. All right. I'm going to recap this, and I hope I get it right. You instigated, or you said, I want to have an 8:30 start time. Was that it?
I wanted to have a Monday morning meeting.
She wanted to have a Monday morning meeting at 8:30, right?
Actually, I wanted to have it at 7:30.
Okay. She wanted to have a Monday morning meeting at 7:30. This is not complicated. And one of our employees comes in, was it the next day?
Yeah.
Says, I'm quitting. Why? Can't make a Monday morning 7:30 meeting. Got to drive my kids to school. And so she was about to lose a good worker because this person couldn't reconcile their demands from home with demands of work. I can't remember what you did next. What'd you do?
I gave up.
She gave up. Who won that? Who's the winner there? The person still works for you, right?
Actually, he quit.
Oh. All right. Forget I told you that story. It doesn't. It really doesn't have a nice ending. All right, I'll tell you the flip side. I had an employee, what was it, 3 years ago. This guy's from Ecuador, and his English is I can't understand a word he says. I have another Spanish speaker on staff, so he came in with her, and she said, Luis wants to ask for some extra time off. I said, okay, why? Luis is an awesome worker. This guy is great. Why, what's going on? Oh, he's got to take his daughter to the doctor. How often? Well, she just got diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer at age 13. Can I have some time off? I'm like, sure. Absolutely, Luis. You can have time off. You can have all the time you want. Now, I buy this guy health insurance and charge him nothing for it because he's an $18 an hour guy, barely speaks English, extremely effective worker, but he's got 4 kids, and I wanted to make sure his family was covered. And I knew nothing about this. This is something I've been doing for a couple of years. And so I was like, okay, you can take all the time you want, and furthermore, the policy I buy you has a very high deductible, $7,000. And I don't want you to be thinking about anything but your daughter while you go through this. And so we're going to pick up all the medical bills for the deductible. It's $7,000, but okay, we have a prosperous enough company to do that. And then I asked him, do you mind if I share this with your coworkers so that if you're not here or you have to go on short notice, everybody understands? Because this guy is like a tornado doing his work. He is so efficient, so effective, and everybody else is like, whoa, look at that guy go. He's a great example for the rest of the workforce. So can I share this so that everybody understands what you're going through? And he's like, I guess. It never even occurred to him that anybody else might want to know. But I got up in front of the whole company and said, Luis is going through this situation. And he's going to need to be here sometimes, not here other times. And I'm telling you, as a company, we're going to cover for him. That's what we're going to do. We're going to cover his medical bills, and we're going to cover when he can't be here. And I told Luis at the meeting, I can't help your daughter. I don't know whether she's going to be okay. Stage 4 cancer is no joke. This could go very badly for you. But anything that we can do to take the stress of work off and to make sure you understand that you're part of this company and this company is going to support you, then that was my message to him and the message to the others. And of course, presented like that, someone who's well-liked, hard worker, terrible bolt of bad luck from nowhere, of course they're going to help. And they did. And that's the positive part of being able to talk to your employees and listen and ask beyond the basic, like I'm quitting because I can't drive in. There's a way to accommodate people. And there's a way to sort of offer right from the get-go some flexibility with working hours and arrangements so that people can deal with stuff like that. And it has a tremendous payoff in terms of employee loyalty and also team building. Everybody liked Luis, and we were so glad that his daughter eventually did get the treatment she needed. She ran up more than $500,000 in medical bills in 3 weeks. That fortunately was all covered by the insurance. And I did end up paying about $7,000 worth to cover his deductible, but she's okay now. So that's part of talking, listening, figuring out solutions. That's prosperity, the company delivering prosperity to the workers by way of benefits, actually. So our complete set of rules, we've got the craftsmanship, the prosperity, and the culture, and those are inspirational and guidance and definition of how we're going to run this company and what we expect from the workers. We have the new employee guidelines, which are also in the book, and I'm not going to go through those in detail, but they're kind of a checklist that we use with, first of all, we show it to people when we're going to hire them and say, okay, here's what we're looking for. And then a couple of weeks after they work for me, we sit down with their manager and myself, and we actually go through these, like, how are you doing on these? So a big part of what I've come to realize the value of this is that we're just writing down who we are. So things are not vague promises or the boss told me this, but I can't get him to admit he told me this. We're actually laying it out there for everybody to see and live by. And that's the rules of rules, rituals, reputation. So we have a set of rules that are tailored to our business, that take into account our people's lives, who they are. They come from me. They're an expression of how I want to run the company. And so we've arranged a situation where there's a clear hierarchy, clear rules, and you know what you're in for. You know what you should do. It's explicit. And that just makes it easier for everybody to get along, because when you think about it, the basic way to organize any human activity for 1,000,000 years has been put someone in charge, come up with some rules, and everybody understands them, and then you can get along and do whatever it is you need to do. This is just basic human wiring that I'm tapping into. And it's kind of weird in a way that some aspects of that are not all that fashionable. It's not fashionable to have a boss tell people what to do. That sounds bad, like I don't want to be told what to do. Why are you the boss of me? Well, organizations work because people are willing to be led. And most of us are actually dying to be led because it removes responsibility from us. So if you can walk into a situation where you're very clear on what the rules are, you know what to do, what not to do, it's way more comfortable. If you go into it, has any of you had a spouse or someone drag you to a gathering of people you don't know? I mean, everybody's done this, but you go into some room, there's a bunch of strangers, and what if they were all wearing a black shirt and you were wearing a red shirt? Or what if they were all talking about ice fishing? Like ice fishing, and you know nothing about ice fishing. What if they're all fans of a sports team and you're not clear on even what the sport is? They're all wearing some logo thing. You're going to feel very, very uncomfortable because you don't know what that group consists of. You don't know what their hot buttons are, how to get them angry, how to make them happy. And we're human beings. We're actually very good at sort of like lying low and figuring out the rules. But it's not a real efficient way to bring someone into an organization. It takes a long time, and you're also subject to the idea that they may look at something that you think is this, and they may think it's that. And so when you lay out these rules, and it's all clear, it's all on paper, it's written on the wall. You ask the boss about it, he tells you the thing that's actually on the wall, not something different. You ask your coworkers about it, do we actually live by this stuff? Is this for real? And they're like, yeah, we do. So that's why we have these things. New employee guidelines. I have an employee handbook that we hand to everybody, and it's a bunch of ways that you can get fired, basically. Don't do these things, I'll fire you. And the last one is, don't do anything that makes me want to fire you, or I'll fire you. But employee handbooks, particularly after lawyers take a look at them, are not useful as day-to-day guidance for people because they're almost always emphasize the negative or a bunch of really boring stuff. So people don't want to read them. They're boring, they're legalese, and they're necessary, but they're not, to my mind, a management tool. They are useful in discipline. So the last thing that we have as a complete set of rules is an actual procedure for discipline. And everybody knows this in my company, that there's stuff that we let slide. But if the boss calls you into the office and there's another person sitting there and there's a piece of paper in front of you, you're in trouble. And my procedure is actually, I'm always doing this in response to some kind of report, like, oh, somebody did this, somebody falsified their hours, somebody screwed up a job, somebody insulted me, somebody harassed me. And in order for me to make it easier to deal with it, I just came up with a procedure. So I have a document that starts off with who's being disciplined, how much are they being paid, what are their benefits. It's a summary of the employment status. Then the thing is, what happened? What was the incident? What day did it happen? Who witnessed it? Witness statements, if there are any. I bring in people and say, okay, what happened here? What did you tell me? Next thing. What company policies were violated? There's stuff in our handbook. There's stuff in these culture statements. Somebody went and broke one of those rules. Well, what were they? So you write them down. You did this, broke these rules. This is all very rational, and I'm doing this in order to organize this whole thing in my head and not be tempted to just fly off the handle and go like, you did this? What the hell are you thinking? Get out of here. You know, like that's not a way to discipline people. Tempting, but not a way to discipline people. So we got the person, the problem, the policy. Next. What do we want to have happen next time? We want you to stop doing this. We want you to start doing this. Here's what we want as a company. We need you to do these things. Next. How we're going to help you do these things. What will we do to provide training, provide interaction, try to remove the irritant? Is there anything we can do as a company? We will do that. Here's the things. Next. Here's what happens if you don't succeed in fixing this. You may get one warning and then get fired. You may get fired. You may get a pay demotion. You may get this or that, but whatever it is, it's not a vague threat. Here's what will happen if you keep screwing up. Put it on paper. Last, this sentence. I have read and understood everything above. Signed, screw up employee. You bring them into the office, you put the paper in front of them, give them a copy, and you read it to them. And that way, the emotional aspect of discipline can be managed, because disciplining workers is the worst. It's difficult. You're dropped into a situation where you may not have a solution. You're dropped into a situation where you may have to discharge someone, which, now I've never been fired because I haven't worked for anybody for 38 years, but I should have been fired a couple times. And I know getting fired from having done it to a bunch of people is about the worst thing you can do to somebody without physically damaging them. I've fired people who were weeping. I've fired people who begged me to not fire them, who said, I gotta, like, what am I gonna tell my wife? What am I gonna tell my whatever? And it's so tempting to give in, to be like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna give you one more chance. Don't do this again. Don't put me in this position. But the reason you discipline workers is not for them or for you, it's for all the other workers. And so there's times when you have to defend the integrity of the group by getting rid of the outlier. And again, this is an extremely unfashionable idea these days. We all know that there's a huge emphasis, certain elements of our society, about protecting the outlier in all cases. People who have the strangest set of configurations you can imagine, like, don't touch them. People who screw up in every way you can imagine are given leeway, because nobody wants to recognize that the health of the group requires that you get rid of the bad actors. Now, fortunately, in the kind of companies we run, and I presume we're all in at-will employment states, we can run our companies so that we are defending the integrity of the company, even if it means an individual gets some punishment or has to go. And again, the discipline of writing down all of that stuff, particularly, here's what we want to change, and here's how we will help you change. And I always end these meetings with a promise that if they can fix it, I'll forget about it. You're back to square one. Like, yes, we do keep the document in case we do need to fire someone subsequently, but in general, you have to learn to forgive and forget in order to get along with people. All right, rituals. So we have the rules. They're good rules. I think they're brilliant rules. They came from me. I'm brilliant. And but now we have to figure out a pattern of behavior to keep them in front of people, keep them in front of mind, and so that part of being an employee of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, you're just doing this stuff. The Monday meeting is the one that I first came up with many years ago, and this is just getting up on Monday morning, same time, 9:30 Monday morning, and then going through a very simple set of numbers. What did we sell last week? And how much did we sell this month? How much have we sold this year? How much cash do we have on hand? What's our accounts receivable? We have an ERP system that allows us to keep track of all the hours that were sold for a job and then compare that to how many hours were used to complete the jobs. And so I give them an aggregate report of whether we were over or under our estimates in the last 90 days and in the last 365 days. We also have a year-to-date company profit on an accrual basis. which is, okay, are we ahead or, are we losing money or are we making money? So those are the numbers. Same thing, every Monday. And in the course of reviewing the numbers, other things come up. Right now, this year, we're actually having a terrible year for new sales. Last year was our best year ever. Right from the get-go, we were beating all other years. We were zooming up into the stratosphere, and we broke 5 million for the first time. And I'm like, I finally have this business nailed. I know how to do it. Look, we're going to 6 million next year. And so, of course, January rolls around. We're on a $3 million pace this year, which is bad news. But I got up last week, talked to the employees about what I think is happening, had them, ask questions. And so that ritual of going through the same thing every week, it's just like a Catholic Mass, honestly. In the Catholic Mass, you got a bunch of stuff that's the same stuff they've been saying for 2,000 years. And the priest gives a homily, which is like an explanation of a Bible saying or a passage. And that can be anything the priest feels like. And that's how I treat these Monday meetings. We're going to give you the same information so you have some sense of the flow. And every time I present numbers, I present it for the previous 3 weeks too, so they can see if there's something changing. And then if there's something more to be said, I say it. So that's a Monday meeting. Tuesday meetings. This is a shop floor meeting that's run by my shop manager, and they actually choose one of the culture statements every week and review it as a group. I don't even get involved with that because I don't want it to always be for me. My shop manager, Ryan, does that for me. They also do a safety training and review what has to go on and off the shop floor. We have, how many are familiar with the Seinfeld Festivus Festival? And for those of you who are not, it's a made-up holiday that consists of airing of grievances and feats of physical strength. So we have a meeting which is about airing of grievances and shout-outs or encouragement for things that went well. And we do this not on a regular basis, but out every 6 weeks. And what I have is a system where we actually have paper suggestion slips in some boxes. And people can write down anytime they feel like it, oh, this went wrong, I had a problem here. Or they can say, Luis did an awesome job, or Kevin was great with the truck, or whatever. They can give each other shout outs, or we can identify problems. And I get the company together, all the decision makers, and we review those slips. And it's a good way for people to identify sort of minute by minute issues that may actually have much wider import, which is why I get a lot of people together to talk about them. And those are a great safety valve because people know that if they're having problems with a procedure, a coworker, a piece of equipment, whatever, there's a way to report it. And once they report it, it's out of their hands. We'll take care of it. But it just gives people some confidence that there's actually a way to improve things and that they can participate. And then the last one, the one-to-one meetings. This is something I started doing just a couple of years ago, 2019. And again, after having heard about it from another business owner. And this is just bringing every one of my employees into my office. We sit down together, and I just say, what's going on? Anything happening at home that I should know about that might affect your ability to be here? Anything we can help you with? Do you have any questions? Do you have questions you want to ask me about, how's the company doing? What are we planning to do? And having that one-to-one meeting with every single employee has been tremendously valuable. Now, it takes time. A lot of these meetings last for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Some can last for an hour and a half if someone wants to ask me a lot of questions. But it's given me a connection to all of my workers and a way for them to tell me about the things that they're experiencing. I have a worker who, we just did a round of these in January, a worker whose father is old, dementia, incontinent, and just sort of got dumped into this guy's lap because nobody else could take care of him. So now he's living with his father, and it's a problem. And, Like, he would have just moped around the shop. He's not one who wants to share this. Like, he didn't want me to tell the other workers anything about this, because that's just not who he is. But he did tell me about it, and so that I can be a sympathetic ear for him. I mean, what I told him is, that's going to suck for everybody involved. Like, I can't do anything about that. Can't help your father. All I can do is make this workplace a place you can go. Since you don't want everybody else to know about it, that's fine. But you can be sure that I know about it, so that if there's trouble, if you can't get here, you can just tell me, and that's taken care of. But when you're here, you also can just be in a refuge where you don't have to think about your father all day. We're not going to bring it to anybody's attention. You know, whatever you set up to take care of him during the day, I can help you with that if you want me to. He didn't. But he could just come to work and do his work and know that it wasn't gnawing at him all the time. And so the one-on-one meetings are the place where that kind of thing turns up. And it's just amazing to get to know your workers as people, not just as workers. You know, like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I actually like all the people who work for me. Some of them are very different from me, and people I never would have met if I'd followed my brother and, you know, where we were headed when we were kids, off to fancy schools and professions and all that. And it's a privilege to know a group of people who come in to work for you and for themselves and to try to make a team. And when they understand that the boss knows and cares, that really differentiates us as a workplace. Because how many workplaces these days are you absolutely certain that nobody who's managing you gives a damn? Like, that's most of them as far as I can tell. But again, we're small, and we have freedom to run our companies the way we want to. So we can be that inspiring boss. Because flip it around, what does everybody want at the end of the day? Like, every human being is happy when they feel that there's somebody powerful who is looking out for them, who has resources, who sort of is giving you support. That's one of the most inspiring things that can happen for anybody. And if we can build a prosperous company and treat each other like human beings, and I can be that boss, that's a huge win for me. That makes me feel great. Like, there's a lot of ways I fall down as a boss. It's really hard to get all that money, and so the company isn't always profitable. But I can do that. I can show I care. And what's the result of all this? Sorry, I should make this point. You got to do this over and over again. Like 3 times a year for the one-on-one meetings. That's a minimum in my mind. And it takes 2 weeks to do each round. I'm trying to fit it in over my other duties, but get them in, schedule them, tell them it's happening. We repeat the Monday meetings, the Tuesday meetings, the Festivus meetings, all that. They're over and over and over again. There's no expiration date. I'll do it till I leave the company because it's been so effective in building a team. Now, I do want to mention the boss's fantasy, because what we all want and dream about, and this was my dream for many, many years, that I would hire someone and I would explain the job to them, and I would put them over at their workbench, give them the tools and the work, go. And then I'd never have to talk to them again. And work would just appear. And you throw more wood over there and stuff comes out. It's a fantasy. It would certainly make life easier if that's how workplaces worked. But it just doesn't work that way. So you got to forget the boss's fantasy. You're going to have to repeat everything you do all the time. And that includes explaining it. Don't be shy about saying, oh, that's another example of culture point number blah, blah, blah. I'm glad you brought it up. Here's how we should deal with this. And just get used to the idea that whatever you want to tell to employees, you got to say it over and over and over and over. And I've had so many of my management level guys, when they first stepped into that role and had to start telling their coworkers what to do, they would come to me and it's like, I told them 2 weeks ago to not do that. They're like, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. Guess what? Your job now is to say it every 10 minutes if you need to. Because that seems to be one of the ways humans are. Like if we don't have somebody putting it in every second, it comes right out. It's gone. You're thinking about something else. So that's just how you manage a small group of people. All right, the results. This has been a huge win for me and my company. And I'm going to go through the ways it's changed some of our procedures. So, hiring. Now, it's been a long time since I applied for a job or went to got a new one. As a matter of fact, it's been so long, I can't remember anything about it. Other than the last job I got through connections, and that's not great, but I got them. So, but I do understand that, and I understand this because people don't quit nearly as often as you think they would, that changing jobs is very scary for people. Most people don't want to do it. They don't want to be laid off. They don't want to be fired. They don't want to quit. I would say probably the younger workers we're seeing are a little quicker to switch from one company to another at a moment's notice. But I can't say that that's a hard and fast rule. I've got a lot of young workers, and a lot of them are very happy where they are and tell me they're never going anywhere. Because, you know, it's a huge risk. You don't know what you're walking into. You go to a new company and they tell you whatever they tell you while they're hiring you. But is it real or is it nonsense? Are they lying to you? Do they just want you in the door? How are you going to be treated? So it's risky and people are scared of it. So I find that when I'm hiring people, I control out these culture statements and say, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. This is my promise to you. And that goes a long way to reassuring people as to what they're getting into. Again, thinking of that situation where you walked into a room and you didn't know anybody. You didn't know what they were like. And you're going to be spending a lot of time with your coworkers. And I think the critical thing about having those rules is people understand that there's some boundaries on how their coworkers are going to be. Like you could have a great boss and to be doing cool work, and if the person in the bench next to you is a real jerk, you got to live with that all day. Who needs that? So it takes away the risk, and it tells us who it tells the prospective employee who we are, and it tells them who their coworkers are and how they're going to act. And in our case, it seems like nobody else who these applicants are considering does anything like this. Like it seems to be a very unusual approach to how to lay out who we are as a company. Most of the time when employers run an ad where they say, I want a cabinet maker, 15 years experience, you know, this, that, the other thing, this is what I want. And how many of them talk about, this is who we are? You might have choices of where you want to go. Good workers have choices. And so maybe you should start the ad with who you are, what kind of organization you're joining. And that's how we write them. Say, we're looking for a cabinet maker to join a company that's like this. You're going to be doing cool work. You're going to have good coworkers. We're all going to get along. No bozos, no fighting. That's my ad. I get a lot of applicants. In retention, so in the course of my Vistage group, we've heard a lot of studies by Harvard Business School, this, that, fancy people, about what makes people enjoy a workplace. And the number one thing is whether they have a friend in the workplace and whether they respect their management. And if they don't have either of those things, then you're looking at people who are liable to quit. So with the rules and with the enforcement of them and the rituals, it's pretty clear that we are doing what we said we were going to do. So yeah, I made the promise in the interview we're going to do that. But when you see the rituals enacted and you see it all in action, yeah, we're doing it. And it's a good set of things. So people are happy to be here. The disciplinary process. I've had some of my best employees for years were great, and then they go off the rails one day for reasons I don't understand. They start doing stuff you don't want. So having that rational disciplinary process where we lay out, here's what we want you to do, here's how we're going to help you, here's what will happen if you don't fix yourself, and here's what'll happen if you do. That has been tremendously effective in taking good employees who are having bad periods of time and turning them back on the way they want to go. And then also having a rational disciplinary process means that coworkers know that the bad actors are going to be removed, but they're not operating under a system where people are randomly removed. Like, the worst kind of disciplinary situation is if a boss is like, okay, if you get in trouble, you're going to get fired. But sometimes if you don't get in trouble, you're still going to get fired because the boss is mad. It's like an angry person. That's not a good situation. So having a rational, described disciplinary process, rational rules, helps everybody be confident that if they screw up, someone will take care of it, and if you don't screw up, you're going to be okay. Let's see. Discipline. Bad workers make good workers feel bad. This is something that I came to realize many, many years ago, but it is a critical point if you're managing a group. Bad actors make the ones you want to perform feel terrible, and it removes their motivation. They're like, why is the boss putting up with this? If the boss puts up with it, why should I make an effort? That's cancer. So those culture statements give you that framework for feedback. And the discipline, the design process that I crafted to be as good a process as it could be, helps with getting people to understand what they need to do. So they can recover from bad behavior, or we can remove them with legal documentation as to why we did it. Because then if they go and run and claim unemployment, then you got to go and deal with those people and say, oh, this person actually set the shop on fire and shot their coworker twice. Oh, he didn't tell us that. So, so it gives you some legal justification for dismissal, and that will allow you to avoid any kind of accusation. Well, you can't avoid an accusation, but you can defend yourself if you're accused of discharging someone for an impermissible reason. We're not allowed to hire people for some of their personal characteristics or foibles. Not a good idea. But you can get sued if someone thinks you did it. So if you have all that documented, you're covered for that. Now, this has worked for me. I'm me. I'm in Philadelphia, where there's a big pool of workers. I deal with people who have tons of money, so it's maybe a little bit easier to be prosperous. I don't have that many competitors. There's not very many people who can do what we can do. So again, it makes it easier for the company to deliver that prosperity. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to recognize that each one of you has a different situation. You're in different labor markets. You're selling different products. You have different competitors. You may be in an entirely different industry. Everybody's different. I'm not telling you that if you do it exactly like me, you're going to get the same results. Because I would be actually kind of astonished if anybody, having heard me, does exactly what I did. Why would you? You've got your own understanding of your company. You understand your employees. You know what you're capable of. Are you someone who enjoys getting up in front of a group of 100-some people, running their mouths, showing how smart you are? That's me. But are you like that? Are you shy? Are you used to talking to your employees? When you talk to them, can you project power? Can you be the boss? Everybody comes to that with different skill sets. And some people are horrified by the idea of talking to their people, or trying to fill their head with something that you think. That's just like, oh, I don't want to do that. They've got their own stuff. So it's possible that this may not be the best fit for you. I'm just telling you that it was super helpful for me. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is I don't really know how this would have worked if I had 4 employees. Like, I passed that 30 years ago. So I rolled this out at a time when we had about 20 employees. And what that meant was that there was already a hierarchy in the organization. In other words, I was the boss. Everybody knew I was the boss. I wasn't out there shoulder to shoulder gluing wood together. I was in my office, and there's a certain intangible power to that. A certain removal from the employees gives you some authority. And again, this is just how humans are wired to perceive authority. And Why do people in authority always emphasize physically that they're the boss? The boss has an office, it's a big office, it's got a conference table, the boardroom, that's where the bosses go. And a king sits on a throne, throne room. We tend to have this sort of physical manifestation of leadership. And it's a little bit harder to establish that distance that makes it easier to tell people what to do when you're a coworker. So a very small company, I don't know how this would work, because part of the day you would be shoulder to shoulder making the drawers or whatever, and the other part of the day you'd have to pull yourself back and present yourself as authority, leader. Here's the ideas, this is what we're doing. And that may be a tough transition to make for people who are in a situation where you're still operational. So those are the two things that I can think of that might require some different approach, and I don't know what the approach is because I wasn't there doing it when I was that small. But I wanted to bring that up because so often, and I've heard a lot of business speakers, they get up there and like, okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm rich, this is how you get rich, I'm successful, listen to me, that's it, that's the program. I had a guy with straight face tell me that I should only hire A-plus performers, and that you bring them in, A-plus people, and you say, I'm going to work you harder than you ever have for 3 years, and then I'm going to fire you. And at the end of that, you're going to thank me. Because I'm so freaking awesome, is basically what it was. And his company, apparently, was very successful with this approach. And I listened to that, and I was like, that's so not who I am. I just believe that people come to you. We're not working with A-plus players. I'm not an A-plus player. We're not getting the Harvard Business School graduates. We're getting ordinary people. And some of us struggle to even get the ordinary people, and we're getting, So that approach isn't going to work. And I don't want to be the guy who gets up here and says, this will work. I think it will. But you should listen to what I have to say and then think about how you're going to make it work in your situation if you want to do it. And if you want to do it, if you want to do it, here's why. Because it's better to define the culture than to leave it to chance. And it's going to help you with management, hiring, retention, and discipline. The effort has to come from the boss. You can't assign this to somebody else. Whoever the employees think is in charge, that's the person who's got to do it. They should be familiar with whoever's talking with these things with them. The boss has to not only commit to doing it, rolling it out, making it an accurate and honest reflection of who they are, because if it's not, it'll go over like a lead balloon. But then you got to be ready. Rules, rituals, repetition. Rules, rituals, repetition. Repetition. All right. Any questions? Well, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. So back when you were talking about the employee that you helped out with their deductible, and I understand all of that and the reasonings behind it, but doesn't that start opening up a precedent? And how do you deal with that? You know, what happens when Julie comes into work on Monday and says, I need to take some time off. My daughter fell on the playground yesterday and she broke her arm or leg, and by the way, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my rent this month because now I have to pay my insurance deductible. How do you deal with that?
Well, I will tell you that the most surprising thing about offering people money when they need it is how infrequently they come to you. So the situation you described, there's two things that wouldn't really happen in my company. One, she would be making more money. We'd make sure that her base pay was enough to support whatever she needed to do. And so I would make more money if I had a lower pay scale. I don't really believe in that. What we do is very complicated and it takes years to train people, and I don't want them leaving. So the basic commitment for prosperity is you're going to pay people better than average so that you remove that temptation. So she should not be dead broke. If her child truly had broken her arm and she needed to deal with it, that's a situation I would help with. But we just don't have that much of that. Even with 26 employees, it just doesn't happen that often. So I think that I can't, who knows? The next person I hire might be like, ooh, this guy will give you money if you ask for it. And maybe that person tries to take advantage of me. But no one in the company right now is like that. And again, because we have a defined culture and everybody's explained, we're actually able to attract very good workers from other companies that aren't as well run. So I just haven't run into that as a problem. Now I will say one other thing. Flex time is a nightmare to manage. My poor shop manager hates it because he's never quite sure who's going to be there on a given day. And all employees hate it when somebody else takes advantage of the policy and love it when they need to take advantage of the policy. So we just all acknowledge that. When people come into me and complain about this, that, the other thing, first thing I can do is check and see how many hours they were actually working. Like, are they up to snuff or not? And if somebody's complaining, I can say, well, what about the time you did it? You know, like when you needed your flat tire or whatever it was. And did you like the policy then? And they're like, oh yeah, it was awesome. Well, and then you have to extend that courtesy to your coworkers. And if you explain, if the employee gives you permission to explain to the others that they need help at that moment, then I found a tremendous response. Again, you build a team of people who like each other and can get along, get rid of the bad ones, they will help each other. When confronted with an issue like that, they'll step up. And that stepping up is a ritual too, when you think about it. It's one of the strongest things you can do to make a team operate, is give them an internal challenge where they have to come together in order to succeed. And when everybody in the group knows that when it's their day in the barrel and they have that bad thing happen and everybody else is going to help them, that is a tremendous builder of culture and loyalty. It's a basic button that you can press on any group of humans. Get them to help each other. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Paul.
Go ahead.
Your flex time off, are your salary, or employee's salary or hourly?
All of them. What we ask them is, I'll email out some of the policies. We actually have an explanation of flex time because it was so contentious. But it's offered to all the employees, and what we ask is for people to establish a predictable, regular schedule that works for you. Like, okay, you got to drop off your kids at 8:30. You plan to be here at 9. And I want to see you at 9. If something happens, you must notify us. And that's the policy. So we at least have an idea of who's in the shop when.
How do you stay on track with that, with timelines? If, maybe the next person in line can't do what they need to do unless that person gets what they need done.
This is where having a somewhat larger organization is helpful because all of my people are cross-trained to cover another when someone's absent. And this is actually,
Can you repeat her question?
her question was, sorry, say it again.
How do you make sure you're on schedule when those people are out?
How do we maintain production schedules when people are randomly disappearing? And this is actually something that intuitively I knew, but my buddy Damien in the Special Forces their method assumes someone can get a bullet at any moment and the others need to cover instantly. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So we make sure that everybody is cross-trained to cover so that there's no position in the company, except maybe possibly mine, which doesn't have someone ready to step into it immediately. Now, as you get smaller, it's harder to do that because smaller companies, people are already doing a zillion things. So you can lose a critical person and then you have a problem. But we're big enough to absorb that. And what's your question?
How does your flex time work with your installers?
Well, The question was, how does the flex time work with the installers? We don't really have that problem because we make a product that gets shipped to installers in other cities, and I don't know what they do with their policies. As long as they install my stuff, it's fine. There's a certain number of installations we do ourselves with our own people, and it's just part of the deal. You know, like the flip side of flex time is there's going to be moments when we need you, and we're going to tell you that, and you're going to have to do it. You know, you're going to have to get up at 4 in the morning, drive down to the Pentagon, and be there for 2 days. That's part of the job. So that's how we deal with it. We don't have to do it all that much, but when we do, we just, you know, like when you've got group loyalty, you can ask them to do things. They'll recognize, oh yeah, it's necessary for us to actually show up and do this work. That's the flip side. So that's how we deal with it. Any other questions? Go ahead.
On the flex time thing again, is it situational? Is it discretionary by you? Is it medical only? Is it unlimited? Like a guy likes taking Fridays off to go fishing, so he's taking Fridays off to go fishing. Does we have-
Okay, so I'm going to introduce a concept that is helpful in these situations. You make a distinction between the incident and the pattern when you're dealing with employees. I'm sorry, we're probably out of time. I've been going forever. I will deal with incidents as they arrive. If incidents start to form a pattern, we discipline the pattern. So we've had some employees who had a hard time getting into work. They seem to be constantly sick, blah, 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 blah. First thing was warn them. Hey, you only worked 80% of the hours that everybody else did. You're not pulling your load. Get it together. And if they don't, I fire them. That's how we deal with it. But you have to see a pattern of it, and you have to think carefully about whether something's an incident or a pattern. All right, you got the giant hook. You want to get me out of here?
Thank you, Paul.
Can I say one more thing?
I believe my email is in the book. If anybody wants any questions, any of the documents, the employee handbook, our test we give to people, just email me and I'll send it to you.
This that's in the book will be on the website for you to download too, so as a PDF. So that's great. For those of you following the agenda, you'll notice we're a little behind. I, on purpose, let Paul go long because he has so much valuable information to share. So I hope you don't mind that we have to cut the next one a little short. Kelly and Lois are prepared to get it done. It's going to be great. We're going to take a 5-minute break. There's coffee, snacks in the lobby, and come right back. Thank you.